Minnesota Vikings are a really interesting team because I think the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears this year are hit and miss. They're either going to be really good or they're going to be in. And I look at both the rosters, they both are fringe playoff teams. They can make it to the playoffs, but they also probably could be on the outside looking into the playoffs. Last year, the Lions finished 7-9, third place in the NFC North. That defense under Mike Zimmer was probably the worst defense I've ever seen Mike Zimmer ever put on the field during his time as head coach for the Minnesota Vikings. Now, you have to take into context that they had a really young secondary, but guys like Cameron Dantzler really turned the corner near the second half of the season. On top of that, you have signed Patrick Peterson in free agency, who I think still has a little bit left in the tank. And on top of that, not only do I feel like Patrick Peterson can contribute and also improve the overall secondary for Minnesota, but I think he's going to be a good mentor for some of the younger guys, some of the younger corners on this roster like Cameron Dantzler or whatnot. So you finished 7-9 last year. What is the best case scenario for Minnesota this year? Well, I think that is going to be... Is it going to pull up? Graphics guy? I think that the best case scenario for Minnesota this year is going to be 10-7. Now, I say 10-7. I know I had Detroit going 10-7, but I feel like all these teams in this division are pretty hit and miss. I definitely see the upside with the Minnesota Vikings. You improve the offensive line. You draft Christian Darrisaw in the first round of this past year's NFL draft. I don't know how in the world they were able to trade down and still get one of the best offensive tackles in this year's draft class. But I feel like Minnesota drafted pretty well. I like the addition of Christian Darrisaw. He's definitely going to improve that offensive line. And we know what Minnesota wants to do. It's no secret they want to run the ball a million times down your throat with Dalvin Cook. You still have Adam Thielen, and you have Justin Jefferson, who probably had the best rookie season that we ever saw out of a rookie wide receiver. So they have talent on the offense side of football. Defense, the talent's still there, okay? You still have Kendricks there, one of the better linebackers in the NFL. As a matter of fact, some people will say and make the argument that he was one of the best linebackers in the NFL last year. That young secondary definitely should come around. You still have Harrison Smith there. So obviously, there is a lot of upside with this team. Now, the downside with the Minnesota Vikings is that this team could go 7-10. Now, you got to look at Kirk Cousins. I know Kirk Cousins isn't the worst quarterback in the league. You definitely can win with Kirk Cousins. I think he's like a top half quarterback if I was doing my quarterback rankings. But I think Kirk Cousins at the same time, he can be really good, but he also can be very volatile. You don't know what you're going to get out of Kirk Cousins on a week-to-week basis. So Kirk Cousins could light up the first half of the season for Minnesota and just completely collapse. Now, I understand people are going to say, well, JT, the offensive line wasn't all that great. I understand that. But let's not act like Kirk Cousins just didn't have bad games last year. Let's not act like Kirk Cousins didn't have some meltdowns, because he definitely did. So I definitely look at Minnesota as a team that has a lot of upside, but the downside for this team is really ugly. On top of that, we're speculating that this secondary is going to get better, but who knows if Cameron Dantzler and the young cornerbacks that they have on this roster are even good. For all we know, these guys may not be good at all. So a lot of Vikings fans can say, yeah, these guys are going to improve, but we don't have the evidence. Everybody around this time of the offseason thinks that their team is going to make it to the playoffs, that their team is going to win a lot of games, that their team's a Super Bowl contender. And I don't think a lot of people actually sit down and evaluate their team on a unbiased condition. I think everybody just looks at how great their team can be, but nobody looks at how bad their team can be. And you look at Minnesota, yeah, this is a team that some people may be sleeping on, but you also got to look at it like this. I think that the Vikings could be a middle of the pack team. And 7-10, I definitely think is a realistic prediction for the Detroit Lions. Now, before I get into my overall record prediction, I got to talk about my swing games for the Detroit Lions. So these are my two swing games for, well, not Detroit Lions, but the Minnesota Vikings, excuse me. So My two biggest swing games for Minnesota this year are going to be against the Dallas Cowboys week 8 and against the Pittsburgh Steelers week 11. Now, the Dallas Cowboys game is a really intriguing game to me because I believe that both of these two teams are going to be coming off a bye, so they're going to be well rested. Minnesota is going to be at home. And on top of that, you look at Minnesota with how their schedule stacks up. This could be a game that potentially could determine how they fare when it comes to the playoff race down the stretch. Now, Dallas is a pretty good team that, like Minnesota, is hit and miss. They could be really good if Mike McCarthy can get this team playing up to the level of talent that they currently have in this roster, or they could be really bad if Mike McCarthy ends up being the coach that he was near the ending of his tenure in Green Bay. So you look at Minnesota and you look at Dallas, I think that these are two similar teams that both have a lot of upside, but they also could be in the middle of the pack as well if things don't go to plan. Then you look at that week 14 game against Pittsburgh. It says week 11 on the graphic. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to edit that out when I go ahead and download this video and chop it up and edit. But I definitely feel like that week 14 Thursday night matchup against Pittsburgh is going to be really big. And the reason why I think it's going to be really big is because when you look at the Steelers and the Vikings, at this time of the season, both these two teams are probably going to be in that wild card hunt, competing to get either that 6th or 7th spot in the playoffs. So I think that this is a very big game. This is going to be at home for Minnesota, and it's going to be on a short week. It's going to be on Thursday night. So when you look at Minnesota, their schedule, I don't think it's tough, but I don't think it's easy neither. You definitely have some pretty tough matchups. You got to face Arizona and Seattle and the Cleveland Browns week 2, week 3, week 4. Then you face Detroit week 5. You got to go on the road and face Carolina week 6. So their schedule isn't easy, but it's not tough neither. I think it's pretty much in the middle of the pack. So you got some winnable games. You also have some games that Minnesota may not have a great chance of winning. So my overall prediction for the Detroit Lions this year, well, the Minnesota Vikings, I don't know why I keep saying Detroit, is going to be 8-9. I think that the Minnesota Vikings are going to go 8-9 this year. I think that they are going to miss out on the playoffs by just this much. It's just that I think that the Vikings are a solid team. Don't get me wrong. But I think that there are better teams that can end up making it to the playoffs other than the Minnesota Vikings. So I have them going 8-9 this year. I think that the offensive line probably is going to be improved, but I don't trust Kirk Cousins. I don't know how much this secondary is going to improve. And although I do understand that Mike Zimmer is a defensive-minded coach, at the same time, you have to think, what if this secondary just doesn't perform how Minnesota Vikings fans feel that it will? Just because you think guys are going to develop and you're hopeful that guys are going to develop doesn't mean they're actually going to. So 8-9 is my record prediction for Minnesota.